25 years ago, I completed my favorite video game ever, Tomb Raider 3, for the first time. Since then, I have completed this masterpiece of a game so many times that I've lost count. This game is just so precious to me, and I truly feel like I've mastered it after all these years. Tomb Raider 3 has now been remastered, and with it comes a brand new challenge in the shape of a shiny platinum trophy. But there was something that I felt that I needed to do first. Something that I had never done before. Because all these times I had completed Tomb Raider 3 in the past, I had done so on PC, not on PlayStation. You see, Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation is a much harder game, with an infamous, evil legacy, and I wanted to complete it. Listen, Tomb Raider 3 is a hard game, no matter what platform it's played on, but on PlayStation, it's particularly hard for one particular reason. Save game crystals. Yeah, in order to save your f***ing game, you're dependent on a very limited resource, which was problematic for someone like me who likes to save my game every minute. This is a game that likes to pull the rug from out under you after all, and typically there's death beneath that rug. This was not my first rodeo, however, so at least I knew where those damn crystals were hiding, and I also knew better than to try and get that medipack in Coastal Village. Or to press that button in, also Coastal Village. Seriously, screw Coastal Village. After first playing through Lara's home to get acquainted with the PlayStation controls and lock Winston inside the freezer twice, I went straight to India for the game's opening level, Jungle. The graphics of Tomb Raider 3's PlayStation version were a bit difficult to get used to, especially now that the remasters have come out, but one of the cool things about them is that Lara leaves footprints in the mud here, which she doesn't in the otherwise superior PC version. Since Jungle is my most played Tomb Raider level ever, I wanted to go through it without spending a single crystal, which I managed to do. As a result, I had 7 of them in my inventory when I began the game's brutal second level, Temple Ruins, which gave me a nice boost in confidence. The at times unacceptable levels of darkness were very worrying, however, since the PlayStation port offers no option to adjust the game's brightness, unlike the PC version. For some parts of the level, I couldn't see shit, and flares did diddly squat. I spent my first save game crystal right after defeating the first statue enemy, as I knew what dangers and bullshit lied ahead. Temple Ruins is an insane spike in difficulty compared to the previous level, so I just couldn't be as conservative with my crystals here as I'd been in Jungle. I would basically go on to use one every time I stood before one of its infamous high-risk trap rooms. And boy were I glad I did on more than one occasion. I still arrived at the game's third level, the River Ganges, with a very healthy collection of crystals though, since Temple Ruins was quite generous with them. I wanted to collect all secrets in this playthrough, not just for the sake of finding as many save game crystals as possible, but also for the sake of completing the game 100%. I suffered greatly on my way to obtain the first one in this level, however, as I just kept falling into the piranha-infested river. There's a certain stiffness to the PlayStation controls that makes it difficult to adjust jumps in midair, which certainly didn't help, but that doesn't explain how I managed to fuck up every single jump on my way to this secret, even the basic ones. One time, I made it all the way down the river to obtain the secret, but then I fell into the water on my way back. It got to a point where I got so tired of starting the level over that I convinced myself to not only spend a crystal right after obtaining the secret, but another one once I got back to the starting area. I effectively spent 2 crystals to earn 1. Stupid. Thankfully, the rest of the level went by rather smoothly, by quad bike standards at least. I only spent 1 crystal in the final level of the India chapter, Caves of Kalia, right before the boss fight against Tony. I was pretty impressed with myself for resisting the urge to spend 1 before dropping into the Cobra Pit, as that bit absolutely terrifies me. Tony is not usually a boss I have trouble dealing with, but I did have to load my game a couple of times this time, so I'm glad I spent that crystal. I eventually put that absolute loon out of his misery, and then I went on to make a controversial decision that potentially could ruin the rest of my playthrough. I did not choose to go to Nevada first. Instead, I chose to go to the South Pacific Islands. You see, conventional wisdom would suggest to go to Nevada first, get Lara's imprisonment and inventory robbery over with, and then go explore the rest of the game, but I wanted to sort of simulate a blind playthrough here. Also, geographically speaking, it makes no sense for Lara to go from India to Nevada and then to the South Pacific Islands afterwards. I'm fossil fuel conscious, you know. The opening of Coastal Village was as strikingly beautiful as ever, even in this graphically inferior PlayStation version. This was not a place for admiring the views, however, but a place for an important decision to be made. This is where the player must decide between 2 different paths to get to the eponymous village. In order to get both the harpoon gun and all of the level secrets, however, including the secret, I had to do a mix of both. When I came across the infamous death button, I took a moment to think about all those poor souls who first played Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation, who pushed this button because that's what you do in Tomb Raider, and then lost their progress for no other reason than the amusement of the level designer. You are in my thoughts, guys. Anyway, despite all of the traps, sneaky ambushes, and poison darts in the level, I managed to go through Coastal Village relatively unscathed, but oh boy, things were about to go south. Pacific Islands. I had fully expected Crash Site to be a total pain in the Jurass, because it always is, but it got even worse than I could have ever imagined. The raptors are some of the hardest regular enemies to deal with, as they are total bullet sponges that dish out a ton of damage, and there are so many of them everywhere. But they were nowhere near as much of a headache for me as their T-Rex cousin was. I have 25 years of experience with Tomb Raider 3, and I've completed the game so many times that I know it like the back of my hand. In my cockiest of moments, I might even be able to convince myself that I can complete the entire game in one sitting without dying a single time. Someday. For this reason, I damn near had an existential crisis when I just couldn't get past this big, stupid, tiny-armed bastard. I just kept dying and dying over and over again. Never in my 25 years with this game had I ever died as much as I did here. I swear, it felt like the game was bullying me. I got so fucking tired of dying all the time that I had to spend a crystal halfway through the battle while hiding from the T-Rex. There was one time where I finally managed to make it all the way out and had the opportunity to just move on and leave the T-Rex behind, but I just had to go back down there and kill it, and, well, that was a mistake. At least dying 17 times to this fucking T-Rex gave me plenty of opportunities to test out different strategies, and lo and behold, the T-Rex doesn't attack Lara if she stands still. Eventually, I was able to cheese the T-Rex to death. I know, shameful, but I'm not even sorry. I had spent so many crystals in this level that I almost convinced myself to not spend one inside the cave towards the end. Thank God I did though, when Lara decided to discard her burned out flare instead of grabbing onto the cave wall. Blowing up the remaining raptors almost felt like therapy at this point, given all of the grievances I'd endured during this level, but thankfully my favorite Tomb Raider level ever was on the horizon. Marubu Gorge. Which made me quite nervous actually, as I was worried that I'd end up hating it after finally experiencing its infamous PlayStation version. But, rather surprisingly perhaps, I might have enjoyed it even more than ever here. Sure, it probably helped that I just had a miserable experience with Crash Side, but I found it really stimulating and immersive to play through Marubu Gorge this carefully, where I couldn't rely on saving my game anywhere near as often as I usually do. I still had to spend more than a fair share of crystals, however, especially in the kayak, which was as miserable as ever and caused me to miss not just 1 but 2 crystals, which really sucked. But overall, I still had a blast. For the final level of the South Pacific Islands chapter, Temple of Puna, I wanted to only spend 1 crystal just before the boss fight, but that turned out to be a bit overambitious. Once I finally got past the big boulders and was ready to fight Puna, I spent my 2nd crystal in the level. This boss fight was harder than ever, not just because I died a lot, but also because there are no hotkeys for weapons on PlayStation. This made it really awkward to switch between my weapon of choice for the lizard men and my weapon of choice for Puna, which the bastard took advantage of. As a result of my frequent dying, I spent another crystal about halfway through the battle, but that's okay because that's what made the difference. So, off to Nevada Desert I was, and since Lara was about to lose all her weapons in the next level, I decided to have a bit of fun here. High Security Compound was a delight to play through as it didn't cause me too much trouble. I took things nice and slow, as you should in a level like this where Lara can't defend herself, and it worked. Getting my hands on the Desert Eagle was as satisfying as ever, so much so that I nearly forgot that I had to go back and get the level's final secret. I was really tempted to use the Desert Eagle on that bastard guarding it, as he's the sole reason why you need to backtrack half the damn level. I made a wise decision not to, however. I needed all of the Desert Eagle bullets I could possibly get for later. Area 51 was so much fun, it always is, but it was quite expensive in terms of crystals. You see, the level has a couple of encounters where the player can be locked out of obtaining some very valuable goodies, and a secret even, if Lara doesn't kill guards quickly after being spotted. I didn't want to risk any of that, so I played it safe and spent crystals liberally. But what a joy it was to visit the alien morgue, swim with the orcas, and explore the UFO again. Overall, Nevada was a nice little breather in between the stressful South Pacific Islands levels and the upcoming evil London levels. I began the London chapter with my lowest amount of crystals since India. For this reason, I decided to be really conservative with my crystal spending in Thames Wharf, as I knew I would need as many of them as possible for the upcoming levels. As a result, the level got off to a very bad start for me, as I spent minutes collecting the first secret and then I screwed up the final jump back. Which meant I had to start the level over. And much later, I damn near had a heart attack when a rooftop mercenary came within an inch of killing Lara. If he had succeeded, I would have lost almost 30 minutes of unsafe progress, which would have been a downright tragedy. But then an actual tragedy did occur, as I ran right past a large fucking medipack that I couldn't see until I went down the slope. That's the game's second most valuable resource flushed down the toilet. It was at this moment I decided to finally spend my first crystal in the level, as I was getting into too many risky situations and making too many mistakes. I had 12 crystals by the end of Thames Wharf, double of what I began the level with, so my strategy clearly paid off. High risk, high reward, as they say. Aldwych is known for being a very difficult level, but that's largely down to its confusing, backtracking-heavy level layout that makes it easy to get lost. This was perhaps my smoothest playthrough of the level ever, however, as I came well prepared and had it memorized to a T. Black, I suppose. There was that one time where I forgot to duck, but I'd rather not think about it. The level was very dark though, and costly in terms of flares and crystals, but that didn't bother me too much, as this was one of the levels I had been saving them up for. Plus, I arrived at Lod's Gate with a whopping 13 crystals, so say what you will about Aldwych, but at least it's fair in that regard. Lod's Gate is a level that doesn't have many fans, but I have always loved it. I did not look forward to playing through it on PlayStation, however, as this is a tough level. The second half of Lod's Gate is downright feared amongst Tomb Raider fans, especially on PlayStation, for obvious reasons, so I tried to spend as few crystals as possible in the first half of the level. And I suffered greatly as a result. Let me explain what happened over and over again, because I refused to use crystals. First, I spent minutes collecting the level's first secret. Then I began climbing the world's tallest wall. Then I failed to do the rotating backflip jump off the wall to grab the crystal above the level's second secret, and then I died. Or Lara did, I just died inside. Every time this happened, I had to start the level over. One time, I made it all the way to the Egyptian room inside the museum, still not having spent a crystal, mind you, and then this happened. Needless to say, I began using crystals going forward. The second half of the level proved to be just as miserable as I'd predicted it would be, with ungodly levels of darkness and constantly getting lost in the underwater maze. On PC, the tunnels in this complex area have different colors so you can memorize where you need to go, but on PlayStation, they all look the same, so even I, a self-proclaimed expert at this game, got lost repeatedly. When I made that final jump to finish the level, I felt very relieved to leave Lod's Gate behind. I figured I could defeat Sophia Lee without spending a single crystal, but after this happened 3 times in a row, I decided to spend one right after obtaining the level's only secret for the 4th time. After giving Sophia the shocking departure she deserved, I began preparing myself mentally for Antarctica, which, in my opinion, consists of the hardest levels in Tomb Raider history. Antarctica's opening level was an absolute medipack drain due to the ridiculous amounts of damage the RX Tech backstabbers dish out. According to the final statistics of the level, I spent 5.5 medipacks in it, which is absurd. Only Lod's Gate had been worse in that regard, and that was because I had to continually feed Lara medipacks at one point to keep her from drowning after I got a little lost. This really sucked because all those medipacks I had been saving up had kinda been reserved for the second and third levels of the Antarctica chapter, not the first one. Thankfully, I managed to keep the medipack abuse to a minimum in RX Tech mines, as I mostly managed to stay clear of venomous mutant breath. Mostly. I did have lots of other problems, however. The minecart rides were as frustrating as ever, the big mutants in the dark were as scary as ever, and the Sub-Zero swim to the end of the level was as unforgiving as ever. As expected, RX Tech Mines went hard on my stash of crystals, and as a result, I arrived at the gates of Lost City of Tinnos with just 8 of them. It could have been worse, but it certainly could have been better as well. Lost City of Tinnos was a nightmare. It's the hardest Tomb Raider level ever in my opinion, and it more than lived up to it here. The elemental trials gave me plenty of frustrating moments, and they also did their part in totally depleting my medipack storage. Since I was getting really worried about how few crystals I had left, I tried to see if I could do the air, earth, and fire trials on one save, but after first dying at the end of the earth trial and then at the end of the fire trial on my next go, I got so tired of repeating them that I began saving my game after each trial. In my least favorite room in Tomb Raider history, you know the one, it's the one with all the platforms and switches, I sure as hell made sure to save my game, which brought me down to just 2 crystals. This room is always a pain in the ass to deal with because you need to pull 6 switches in a specific order and you're always just a misstep away from plunging to your death. Plus, you'll trigger an infinite swarm of wasps if Lara steps on a specific floor tile, which my clumsy ass of course managed to do, despite the fact that I did my best not to. As a result, I freaked out and panic saved my game when I probably should have loaded my previous save instead. I somehow made it against all those odds, but it would have been less of a hellish experience had I not stepped right into a hornet's nest. I spent my last crystal just before opening the door to the game's final secret. This meant that if I wanted to be able to save my game in the upcoming final level, I had to get the final crystal at the end of this long and difficult timed run. Which I did, first try even. As the disturbing cutscene for Meteorite Cavern began playing, I felt really proud that I had made it this far in Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation. Never could I have imagined, however, how much trouble I would have against Dr. Willard. I spent my absolute last crystal halfway through this battle as I got tired of starting over each time I died. It would have been nice with at least 2 crystals here, but oh well. Once I finally killed Dr. Willard, I realized what I had done, and let me tell ya, that ascent out of the cavern and blowing the final enemies to pieces felt better than ever, because I had finally completed Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation. So, how was it? It was hell at times, but for a gaming masochist like me, it was also really fun. There's no question that my experience here in no way is comparable to someone who had their first time with Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation, but I still had a tough time playing through it. Those restrictions on saving your progress makes for an entirely different experience that's much more challenging, but also much more fulfilling somehow. No matter what, completing Tomb Raider 3 on PlayStation has been excellent training that has prepared me well for what undoubtedly will be an even greater challenge. Tomb Raider 3's Platinum Trophy. But that's a story for another day. As always, thank you so much for watching. Take care.